on this episode, I am blessed to be joined by the one and only Lottie Whyte.
Turning up in a very professional sporting environment with a B&Q drill. Took it into the changing room at Harlequins, got absolutely laughed at. The England rugby boys started messaging him saying, can you make me one? Can you make me one?
When do you decide to make the switch from side hustle into full-time business?
6 months after that, it just became clear that there was a real opportunity to scale the business. It was growing really fast through lockdown, and I just physically couldn't manage all the aspects of my life, and it felt like a crunch point. I was walking away from a really good salary and also a career that I had strived so hard to achieve. The self-doubt was really about how difficult the journey is. We're waking up to the fact that you don't have to tolerate injuries. It is my purpose, it's my passion, it's my community, it's everything.
Welcome to another episode of Big Risk Energy. On this podcast, we talk to an amazing range of people. And we talk to these people about risk. Risks they've taken in their lives, risks they've taken in their careers, when they paid off and when they didn't.
Lottie, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me, I'm excited.
So I think we first met must have been 2-3 years ago, where we had a random conversation off a connection on LinkedIn. And it was very, very clear early on, you were one of the most driven people I've spoken to. No, it was, you sometimes speak to someone, you're like, it's that art part of being an entrepreneur, the passion and the drive. And you've obviously got that in abundance, and all the things you've achieved so quickly, speaks to that. But there are so many things I want to understand in terms of risks that you've taken. One of the things that fascinates me, as I was saying to you before, is your co-founder is your husband, which I think is fascinating. Tell me about the story. How did that come together? How did you guys decide to build a business together, and what's that like?
Yeah, so it really came about because Joe, my co-founder / husband, was playing professional rugby at the time. And he was continually getting injured. He was out with Achilles tendonitis, and he effectively was meant to be fitting my kitchen and put a stool end onto the end of a B&Q drill, started treating his Achilles, took it into the changing room at Harlequins, got absolutely laughed out the changing room, as you can imagine, turning up in a very professional sporting environment with a B&Q drill, and then leaves it in the changing room, comes back about half an hour later, and all the boys are using it.
Wow.
And raving about how it's making them feel. And I don't know if you follow rugby, but a guy called Carl Sinclair took £300 out of his wallet and said, Grazer, which is what they call my husband in the changing room, I've got to have it. It's a game changer.
Wow.
So he goes back to B&Q, buys 10 more drills, sells them to all the Harlequins boys. The word spreads to England. The England rugby boys start messaging him saying, can you make me one? Can you make me one? And he's super practical and innovative, but he's not a businessman. He spent the best part of his life, 15 years playing sport.
Sure.
So I sort of came in with my business head, had spent sort of 7 or 8 years working in corporates. Hang on, I think there's an opportunity here. And I'm also an incredibly passionate everyday athlete. Sport is my biggest passion in life. And I was like, I'm training for marathons, playing hockey, doing CrossFit. I was getting injured all the time. And I was like, how come I don't understand anything about these tools, these innovations, how I can take better care of my body? So the two of us kind of came together and came up with the idea for Myo Master. And the mission is really, we want to create the highest quality recovery products for the hardest working athletes in the world.
Wow, that's insane. So you had product market fit within 20 minutes.
Well, you know what? It's interesting because I felt like there's product market fit because 20 rugby players bought your thing, but that's not really product market fit because they're elite players. It's super niche. I was like, hang on a second. We got to go trial whether this works on a more macro basis because, elite professional rugby players is a very small pool of people.
Sure.
It does not a business make.
Yeah.
And so one of the first things we did was invest like 1,500 quid of our own money, which at the time felt like a lot, and went to a cycle show at the Excel. And
so this is when it's firmly a side hustle. This is, testing
totally
things.
Side hustle, testing. Okay. We're like, let's see, completely working our jobs. Joe's playing professional rugby. I'm working in the city, sitting on the board of M&C Saatchi. And we were like, let's, go and test it out. So he makes as many drills as he possibly can in the spare room. We take it to the cycle show, and you can imagine, purely the noise of the thing stopped in like crowds were just completely crowding our store. It was like 4 people deep, this crowd around the thing, just because it was so different. No one had seen anything like it. They were intrigued to try it on their bodies, and we sold all of them. And we were like, okay, so now we're starting to establish a little bit of product market fit, because cyclists, everyday cyclists, there's a lot of them. So if we can sell it to them, I think we have something.
Wow. And I think that's one of the things which always excites me about the sports market, is because sports is, although at an elite level, quite a small market size, it's an identity.
100%.
You know, for so many people, it's like, you know, professional running gear is acquired by how many people? Not professional runners, but it's just so tied into people's identity. That's how people see themselves. So having that kit, I mean, I think that's a huge market size, right?
It is unbelievable. If you think about, you know, the mega brands that we totally admire, take a Nike, the big obvious one of the best brands in the world, arguably the best brand in the world. That is built on the inspiration of elite sporting people, elite sporting athletes, across runners, across basketball, across golf, a ton of things. And you're like, hang on a second, they're like one of the biggest brands in the world. There aren't that many elite athletes out there. It's a tiny pool of people, but it's because we're inspired, right?
Yeah.
Sport is it's community, it's achievement. It means so much to the everyday person. And the reason I think it works really well for Joe and I is because he has this incredible story, which is his to tell, but about how he made it as a professional rugby player against every odds. He should not have made it. He still say that to anyone who'll listen. And I am incredibly passionate about doing sport. I train every single day, but I'm not an elite athlete. But it is my purpose, it's my passion, it's my community, it's everything. And so for us, like, this is about creating amazing recovery products, but it's also about the beauty of sport, right?
It's incredible. And I think as well, if you've ever had an injury, which I'm sure you have, well, you said you had tons, psychologically, if you are someone whose mental health is so tied into exercise, and for people who exercise regularly, it is probably the biggest pillar of their mental health.
Right. Getting
an injury and the damage that causes, I mean, it destroys your life for that period of time when you are injured. So, I Whoop, recovery, like all of these things, right? It's super interesting.
It is. And I think just sport has so much power. It has so much opportunity to change your mindset. You know, there's some incredible studies about people who are suffering with depression consistently doing exercise versus taking antidepressants. And the people who were doing sport consistently and maintaining that had better results than the people who were taking antidepressants. Like, the power of it is unbelievable if you can find something that you love to do. So yes, when you get injured, it's incredibly difficult. And I've seen it at every different aspect, you know, of people who are just doing this as their passion, as an elite sports person who's out of their game and out of their job, and what that means. So I think, you know, recovery it's a really fast growing category. Whoop, Aura Rings, driving that kind of knowledge and education amongst the everyday athlete. But we're waking up to the fact that you don't have to tolerate injuries, and also that you need to take care of your body if you want longevity in the thing you love to do.
Yes, absolutely. And that's another key word, longevity. People are obsessed with that idea right now.
Yeah.
And I think for a long time, we spent, you know, we hear the term mind, body, soul, right? And I think it gets banned around a lot. But I think now people are more and more waking up to the fact that you cannot separate the mind from the body.
100%.
And there are people, and I've been so guilty of this previously, being like, okay, my mind's on, I don't care what happens to my body. It's almost like a separation, right?
Yes.
And you create this gap between, you know, the observer up here and the actor out there.
Exactly.
But you realize that no, they are intertwined. And if you let one go, the other follows.
Exactly. And to kind of the inverse of that is, if you take great care of your body, your mind can achieve exponentially more than it would if you weren't. And that's kind of how I look at it. It's like, for me, sport helps me unlock optimum performance in every area of my life. It helps me become a better parent. It helps me become a better entrepreneur. And it helps me manage every aspect of my life. And I think that's what people are waking up to.
Okay, so tell me, what are your top recovery tips?
So sleep. Without a doubt, there is nothing as valuable for you as sleep. And, you know, what's interesting is, as a brand, you know, we don't sell anything to do with sleep, but we will tell you, like, don't bother investing in one of our products if you're not sleeping 7 hours a night. Like, do that first,
Love
that first, and then you can look at the extra things that we can offer you. And that's because, you know, we're really passionate about recovery as a tool to be better rather than just like buy our products.
Yes.
The second thing that I'm really loving right now is cold water immersion.
Okay, you're speaking my language right now. Yeah.
I am obsessed. And I started off like barely hitting 20 seconds, up to like 2.5 minutes now.
Wow, 2.5 minutes.
Yeah.
That's great. What are you doing? Showers?
No, we've got an ice bath.
Okay.
And both of us are doing that. Joe's doing it every day. I'm doing it every other day.
Okay.
And for me, the benefits, I'm doing a lot of endurance training right now. So there are benefits for that, but mostly it's mind. To your point around mind body, it is unlocking this sense of achievement first thing in the morning, but also, you know, there's tons of studies out there about the benefits for concentration
100%.
and motivation and release of endorphins and dopamine and all of that great stuff.
Yes.
And then it goes all the way through to how it helps you burn fat, which isn't my motivator, but I think there's a lot of really interesting science around it.
That's so interesting. And you're taking me onto one of my favorite topics, which is dopamine addiction, ADHD, all the things that are, you know, things that I'm really, really cognizant of, because so I've got ADHD. The way the ADHD brain works is the task and focus part of the brain in a healthy brain fire asynchronously. So one goes up, the other goes down like that.
Right.
In the ADHD brain, they fire together. And the way for us to regulate that, for the way for us to get in sync, as it were, is through dopamine. So that's why people with ADHD have incredibly high rates of addiction. It's why they lend themselves to entrepreneurialism. Things which keep on spiking dopamine are the way for us to be able to focus.
Right.
Now, you can get dopamine from playing around your phone, eating junk food, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
So having to focus on things which release a long arc of dopamine, cold immersion, exercise,
healthy way,
a sustainable, healthy way is something which I think is going to be an exploding category, because interestingly, people used to think ADHD, well, interesting to me anyway, people used to think ADHD was something that you're born with, but the way that we're using our phones is actually bringing on ADHD in more people. So I think what you're talking about now is going to be one of the keys to keeping our collective sanity together.
I mean, you've touched on so many things that are incredibly fascinating to me. And there was, you know, an amazing Rich Roll podcast with a neuroscientist talking about that exact thing, the addiction to our phones and how that is literally effectively rewiring our brains. And it is incredible how difficult it is to stay focused now. I think the average time of focus is like 2 to 3 minutes or something. And if you think that's us and our generation, what is that going to be like for our children?
Yeah.
And how do we manage that? And
I mean,
so,
how do you feel about that with a young child?
Yeah, I'm really disciplined about it.
Yeah. Okay.
And I kind of like get the piss taken out of me a little bit. But
so
like,
what do you mean discipline? What does that look like?
I didn't let him watch any television until he was 3. We've just like introduced a tiny little bit because I was reading a lot of studies about how important it is free play is to developing your imagination and your brain development. And so I'm like, I don't want him sitting in front of a screen.
Sure.
He doesn't, you know, ever touch a phone. I would never let him sit and watch a screen in a restaurant or anything. And I'm not judgmental at all of anybody who does.
I'm totally judgmental of them. I mean, that is crazy behavior, right?
I mean, I understand that everyone's got different pressures, etc. And I'm definitely not a perfect parent.
Sure.
But yeah, it's something I'm extremely cognizant of. There's that. The other thing that's massive for me is diet. So the power to influence brain development, concentration, and the health of your mind through a healthy diet. And we're conditioned in our society right now, literally to wake up and feed our kids Weetabix or a cereal in the morning. And I just wish people understood the incredibly damaging effects of that and how the impact it has on your kids' concentration when they go to school. And I'm like, you know, I think if only parents were being fed the right information, because we could go down a really long conversation.
I'm
about
here for it. I'm here for it. Let's slag off all of our parents, because that's really what I'm here for. But
you know, I think it's really about lack of education. Like, you know,
totally.
we're not being fed the information that tells you, like, giving your child cereal in the morning, as a really simple example, is one of the most damaging things you can do in terms of setting them up for a healthy, productive day.
Sugar to the undeveloped brain is the same as cocaine.
You're exactly right.
Yeah.
And it's, it's so difficult. And I know it is because giving my son sugar makes him happy, and I want to make him happy, especially when I'm feeling guilty about not spending time with him. What are the quick ways I can give him dopamine?
Yes. I'm
Sugar's
assuming
a great one.
You're not doing cold immersion for him quite
I've
yet.
tried to make him get it. He ain't feeling it.
But you're totally right. So, because my mum grew up in communist Hungary, they were ended up in a refugee camp for 2 years, and then so when I was growing up, my mum had no idea about food security, because for them they were worried about eating growing up. So it's like I get it. But now I think when we are as armed with the information that we are, we've got to be implementing this, because otherwise we are going to grow up with a generation of addicts. We've got to be so on top of this.
It's really scary. Between screen time, the evolution of technology, the evolution of the way that we eat, and also inactivity based on, the way we work, sat at computers, etc. It's like a really, really dangerous combination. And I don't think we've fully grasped the extent of the damage that we're causing. And I think it's really difficult for parents, because it's like, you don't know what you don't know. So if you're not in fact, like a family member of Joe's has 2 young kids, and we were just with her for a week over half term, and we were trying to explain to her about protein and about the power of protein versus carbohydrates and sugars, and she just had no idea. And why would she? And the only reason we know about it is because we're into training and nutrition, right? But like, if you're an everyday mum and you're walking down the supermarket and Weetabix tells you that it's low in sugar and it's a healthy breakfast and it's running this campaign for kids at breakfast, you're like, sure, I'm going to buy this cereal. It's quick, it's easy, great.
So a couple questions I have for you, and these are very broad questions. If you've got answers to them, amazing. I mean, one of them is just to your point there, how do we cut through marketing? How do we cut through marketing which says this is a healthy breakfast, and how do we give people more information around this? And I get the feeling that with what you guys are building, education is a big part of what you want to do. And the other part is there is a massive reality. Cost of living crisis, the best ingredients, organic food, all these things are not affordable 100%. For a large part of the population. So how do we improve this? In 3 words. No, I'm joking.
Fuck no. The power of...
I could have guessed the last 2 there.
The power of influencers, podcasts, the conversation we're having right now, the people that I put in my ears, and I know a lot of people do, is just enormous. And I think we're not going to get the big FMCG companies to change their messaging. It's unrealistic. It's too big a battle. And, the government have been incredibly slow. Embarrassingly slow. And what we can do is, as younger brands and also as influencers and individuals, we can take ownership of educating that. So just to give an example, the family members that we were talking to, they listened to Stephen Bartlett. It's a really good example. They were going on about the Stephen Bartlett podcast and Diary of a CEO. That's the way I think to get information into people's ears, because it's so accessible. Everybody's on TikTok, everybody's on Instagram. And, how can we make sure that influencers are pushing positive messages? Yeah,
it's interesting. I always wonder with the way that the algorithm works for me, because I see so much healthy content. I'm this is great. There's so much healthy content out there. But I know that if I look at someone else's, it's going to be totally different. But it's interesting, I think although we know on a physiological or at least neurological level, the actions of being on social media are negative, in many ways, the content that we see is a reflection of our interests, right? And I think it's an interesting one to know whether we're all just going further down our own route, or if there is cross-pollination, and are people being able to discover these things even if they're not interested in it.
Oh, the power of the algorithm. I mean, that's a whole nother conversation. And one that everybody has to be wary of. But I think the way to look at social, certainly the way that I approach it is such an opportunity to create a kind of curated and disciplined world around yourself based on what you're trying to achieve. So like, I follow 100 people on Instagram and that's it. I edit it ruthlessly. Like every month I'm like, okay, you're gone, you're gone. Yeah. And the reason is because otherwise you can find yourself really easily influenced by things that aren't having a positive impact on your brain.
Yes.
So for me, I'm clear about what my 3 goals are for this year, right? They're being a great parent. They are building my business to 7 figures profitably.
Love that.
And they are training for a half Ironman, right? So I'm like, if you aren't adding to those 3 goals when I look at your content, that's not helping me right now, because that's not what I'm trying to achieve right now.
Wow.
Do you know what I mean? Like,
That's
I'm not
brutal
following
in such
the
a great
mum
way.
who looks incredible,
Yeah.
who's a fashion blogger, because I don't have time to look incredible right now. It's not my priority. So I'm not interested in buying your clothes.
That's very, very interesting. Can I ask, do you drink?
A really interesting question. Just very timely for me.
Okay.
So I drank a lot in my 20s, like a lot. And it was just very much part of the culture that I was, it's part of the culture.
Yeah.
I was working in the city, went to uni, all the classic stuff.
Of course.
Recently, I've been I didn't drink for 100 days, start of the year, had a couple of drinks. And what was so interesting was, I think when you're drinking consistently, you don't necessarily notice the impact.
Yeah.
And then when you stop and you do it, and I mean, I had 2 glasses of rosé, right? Like, it was pretty basic. And I was for like 2 or 3 days, I felt depressed. I felt disappointed in myself. I felt tired. I didn't want to train. All of the things that keep me happy and motivated just went out the window. And after that happened, I'm like, nah.
Yeah. It's I've literally gone through something so
Have
similar.
you?
Quit for 5 months. Broke this weekend.
Oh,
Gutted.
really?
Absolutely
But how did
gutted.
you feel?
I really enjoyed it in the moment and have hated myself ever since, right? Like, it's exactly what you said. And I mean, God, you want to terrify yourself, because I was very much the same in my 20s. Seeing what recovery meant on Whoop after a night of drinking, it was like, oh, no wonder I'm going to be dead at 40. It's just
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it was pretty brutal to see that side.
Insane, isn't it?
But I think the point around motivation, like clarity, lucidity, like it's and you know, for this podcast, so many of our listeners are entrepreneurs, investors, people who are trying to be as optimal as possible.
Yeah.
It's such at loggerheads with everything we're trying to achieve.
Right.
I think I think we're going to see a massive trend. I mean, even this year, you know, we've got 50 people that connected. I would say at least 45 of them are doing dry Jan, and probably half of those at least went to the 90-day mark and were just like, I feel so great.
Yeah.
But it's a trap, you know, it gets a slippery slope. Once you go back in once, you know, then I think it probably starts getting easy to drink again. But I think it's going to be a massive rise, teetotal.
I totally agree. I think for me, the philosophy that I'm kind of living by now is that, and as I'm getting a little older into my 30s, I'm like, I don't want to be on my deathbed someday thinking kind of full of regret because I like pursued tons of small distractions. And that's what drinking feels like to me. It feels like a small distraction in the moment that actually has a monumental impact on going after my dreams.
Yeah,
do you know what I mean?
I do.
And it sounds like over the top because it's like a drink,
not at
whatever.
all. Not
But
at all.
it just has such an impact.
I think if you're a very, very driven person, the frustration you feel at just being 2 days out the game, you know, after having that drink, like, it's a killer. So I don't think it's over the top at all, and I feel the exact same. But you're right, we do things the wrong way around. Really, 20s should be about driving. When you're
100%.
70s, that's when you should start getting to
Get
crack.
pissed,
Do you know what I mean? No, just go for it, right?
Exactly.
Once you're 70, but we're just doing it the wrong way around, which is interesting.
Which is
interesting.
Yeah, it is, but I don't regret it.
Of course not. So, okay, going back to the story. So you've had this, you know, amazing side hustle. It starts picking up. And when do you decide to make the switch from side hustle into full-time business?
Yeah, so we side hustled it for about a year and a half. And also in that time, I got pregnant and had a baby. And I was side hustling it whilst I was on maternity leave from my job in the city, and whilst I was raising this baby. And what that meant, because we had a although it's a side hustle, it's a fully functioning business, right? Yeah. So it meant that I went back to work like 10 days after my baby was born. I closed our first round like 6 weeks after, and it was all really quite stressful.
Wow.
So it got to a point, I went back to work 6 months after, but I'd really just been working the whole time, just on a different thing. And then about 6 months after that, it just became clear that there was a real opportunity to scale the business. It was growing really fast through lockdown, and I just physically couldn't manage all the aspects of my life. And it felt like a crunch point where, you know, I don't think it's that often where you come up with an idea, you get it to a stage where you're like, okay, this is scaling, there's an opportunity here. You've managed to raise a little bit of money. I just thought it was too good an opportunity, but it was also frightening. Speaking of risk, probably the biggest risk, because, you know, I had a 6-month-old baby, and I was walking away from a really good salary and also a career that I had strived so hard to achieve and got to a level that I was really proud of. And it felt like I was just throwing it all away and starting over again in an industry, in a space that I knew nothing about from a professional perspective, to pursue a dream that was effectively going to be 100 times harder in terms of time commitment and input, whilst like doing the other craziest thing I'd ever done, becoming a mum.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredible. And, you know, one of the things that we discussed before, and one of the things we love doing on this podcast, is trying to amplify these types of stories, because, and I'll be totally transparent, when you were describing that, in my head I was like, wow, superwoman, like genuinely in terms of being able to do those things. But I shouldn't be thinking that. Right. I shouldn't be thinking that. It should be like, yeah, that's vital, like obviously. Yeah. You know? Yeah. So how much in this journey have you come up across that, and people who have questioned or detracted or, you know, hated on that journey and said, you know, you're not going to be able to do it for X, Y, Z. And, you know, how did you find the strength to keep on pushing through that?
Yeah, I mean, to be totally honest, the biggest doubt has been myself. And I found I don't particularly feel that guilty about pursuing the dream in terms of compromising time at home, because I'm a firm believer that, you know, we shouldn't give up or sacrifice our dreams because we became a parent or became a mum in particular. And I think it's such a shame that often society puts that expectation on women, and, you know, often you're viewed through this lens of like, you should be prioritizing your child at every aspect of this. So I think the self-doubt was really about how difficult the journey is of both of those things, and doing them both at the same time it almost crippled me with doubt. I was like, I've gone through periods in the last 2 years where I've like really struggled to pick myself back up and keep on going, just from a purely like a mental self-belief perspective. You're combining like really extreme physical sort of, you know, giving birth, that's really challenging, and then you know, with the self-doubt that comes along with fundraising, for example, and just constantly getting up and being told no, and going home to a baby who doesn't sleep all night, like the combination of those two things is really challenging. But I'm really lucky that I married a guy who shares my desire to get up and achieve a lot, and he's super motivated and ambitious, and he is the expert on banishing self-doubt. So he's effectively been my daily motivational speaker. Like, you don't let anything stand in your way, and he's proved that in his life of what he's achieved already, so it comes with this great amount of credibility, and I think that kind of partnership has been crucial to getting to where we are today. Amazing.
And then I think it gets to a stage where the self-belief then gets supplemented with undeniable proof. Right. So as you start seeing, okay, we're getting the traction, it's like, because everyone starts with a bit of delusion, right? You have to, because when you're doing something, you wouldn't do it. Exactly. You're doing something brand new, you've got to be deluded that this is going to be the biggest thing ever. Right. Because otherwise, why are you doing it? Right. And then obviously the ability to point to something and say, well, actually, we did just sell out the first 20 that we did. Actually, we did just have a queue 4 people deep at the first exhibition. So obviously that then starts becoming quite positively reinforcing. And do you look to those moments when it does get tough and say, well, actually, look, we can see the progress being made here? Yeah, I think it's such an interesting point. And I would say maybe my biggest piece of advice to other people starting out on the journey is like, have your delusional dream. I tell people all the time, we want to be the Nike of sports recovery. And they're like, and then expect you're going to have to endure
And I think it's a really difficult concept for people in this day and age, going back to dopamine hits, in that we are really used to like instant gratification. And the process of entrepreneurship for 99% of people is a long slog. Yeah. It's not instant gratification. And so you have to be prepared. And I wish I'd been a bit more prepared when I started, to just know this is going to take time. You're going to effectively be on a journey where you just fail loads and loads of times. Every now and then you'll get something right. And exactly as you said, cling on to the thing that you got right as proof that you can continue and should continue. I've had so many conversations, to be totally transparent, and this isn't what I put out in the world normally, because it's not what people want to see, but where I've been like, I'm done. Like I'm just going to go back to my job. I'm going to have 5 weeks of holiday. I'm going to get my comfy salary. This is too hard. I'm not good enough. I don't know how to build this thing. I can't do it. Like, I've nearly quit so many times because it got so hard, and I just couldn't see the way forward. Yeah. And now it feels like we're in a great place with the business. It's scaling, but we had like weeks upon weeks upon weeks of just failure upon failure upon failure and things not going right. And I just wish more people would talk about that bit, because that's the reality.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where the discipline comes in, right? Because if we were all on an upwards trend the whole time, if everything was going right, this would be eody. This would be the best job in the world, the easiest job in the world. Yeah. It's in those moments being able to, find that cutting through the negative self-talk.
Exactly.
Right. And it's so difficult to do. And it's amazing that you've got a partner who, as you said, is the best at that, which is great that you've got someone next to you. Because one of the things that I find, I'm a solo founder, I'm single, I find that sometimes the level of ambition we have, when you say we are going to be the Nike, we are going to be on that level, it alienates people.
Of course,
and people think you're fucking insane, because they're just like, hold on, but you're here and you're talking about this and you sound insane, right? And maybe it is a little bit insane, but that's what you've got to be to try and get there. Right. So it's amazing that you do have a support system which feels the same. And has that same mentality. And I think that's why sharing those stories for people who don't necessarily have that support system directly around them is so important.
Right. And I also think a bit like we were talking about with social media, it's really important to curate your life when you're doing this journey as much as possible. So who are you following? What podcasts are you listening to? Who are you following on social? Who are you spending time with? What kind of people are you bringing into your team? What kind of investors are you allowing to come on board? Make sure that they all are supportive of this dream, and they all allow you to be more convinced about it every day. And that if there's anyone who's taking away from it, like, distance yourself. Yes. I'm a big believer that, like, in this day and age, you can have like 10 mentors that you haven't even met. I'm obsessed with George Heaton, the founder of Represent, right?
Love that.
Like, I love the lessons he teaches me. I've never met the guy, but I love how he's built his business. I love his ethos. I love his discipline. I listen to podcasts of him once a week, and I just take so much away from it. Amazing. He's a mentor to me that I've never even met. George, if you're listening, let's hang out.
That's so cool. That's such an unbelievable concept. And, it's something we probably all do, but to put words to that is amazing. It's like my only two friends are Andrew Huberman and David Goggins. Like, exactly. I don't care about anyone else. I don't listen to anyone else.
You've got the best friends ever.
Absolutely. But that's so interesting. And you're right. It's actually you can build your own support network through content that way. Wow. That's mind blowing. Honestly,
I learned that from George.
That's great. That's super exciting. So I also want to talk about Myo Balm. Yes. Super successful product. Yeah. Sounds like you guys are just, whacking it out of the park with every new product selling out immediately.
Exactly back to what we were just talking about. I'm like, you see the couple of successes. You don't see, the 300 units I've got in my warehouse of a product that's never going to sell. Yeah. And every business has that. And the quicker we get comfortable with it, the better you're going to be. In terms of the Myo Balm, our vision is to be the home of sports recovery. So ultimately, we want you to be able to buy, as an everyday athlete, every incredible product that will help to advance your recovery, right? And so for us, launching a CBD balm was an obvious next step for us. The power of CBD is incredible. Another conversation, but, I think it has incredible benefits. And it's been really successful. We worked for like literally 9 months and so many iterations to get it right.
Yeah.
And we're really proud of it. And it's been a great product. But like I said, we had 10 failures before that. So.
Yeah, of course. But it's exciting when you see that one's just picked up in that way. And was it difficult releasing a CBD product out of interest?
It's
Possible. I can imagine.
It's not even ingestible, right?
Yeah.
You put it on your skin. So how much damage can it really do? It's disappointing. I think that UK legislation hasn't caught up with the benefits of the product. We'll wait and hope. But yes, it was incredibly difficult, and I probably wish that I'd understood a bit more about that before we launched it. But it was the right thing for us to launch. And what's been really nice about it for us is that for quite a long time, we had sort of 4 or 5 core SKUs. And what it meant for our kind of community and this small group of people that we've got that are really big fans of the brand and following the journey and all of that stuff, there was nothing else for them to buy because they were like one-off products that last for 2 or 3 years because they're great quality. And now introducing new products that we have recently mean we're really getting this validation that we are building the home of sports recovery because we've got this kind of diehard community that whatever we launch, they trust we're going to bring the best thing. And as soon as we launch something, they buy it and they're recommending it to all their friends. And that is super powerful. It's what we always wanted to build. And it's really great to see that coming to fruition now. Amazing.
And how do you interact with your community?
So we do a lot of in real life
nice
activations. So there's 3 pillars to that. We do a lot of trade shows where we often see the same people. Right. Again, we'll do the running show, the cycle show, all of that stuff. That's one pillar. The second pillar is at the end of races. So our kind of vision was to be at the end of every endurance race, to give every athlete who competes a great recovery experience as an extension of the race. You cross the finish line, you come into the Myo Master Recovery Hub. That looks like masseuses, our compression trousers, masseuses who are using our balm, compression trousers, a stretch area with our percussion, a hydration stand, and our ice bath cold water immersion, right?
That's incredible. Those people are going to love your brand.
Amazing. And we're really lucky because we have a product you can actually interact with. That's so powerful. So yeah, we want to create an amazing experience at the end of races, which we're doing a lot of. And then lastly, we do what's called golden ticket events, which are kind of up to 30 people. And we'll invite one of our athlete ambassadors down. Alex is a good example, the Olympic triathlete, and he'll come and train 30 mad everyday triathletes.
That's so cool.
We just put it on, it's free. It's like we want to improve the performance of every athlete we meet. That's our goal. So how can we do that? By giving you recovery hubs at the end of races, by creating opportunities for you to train with elite level athletes.
Wow, that's incredible. I think you're doing community in such an amazing way. And I see it online. I see the online part of it, but it's clear how much, again, it speaks to identity. You know, you really do have that opportunity as a brand, obviously, you know, teaching you what you know. The opportunity you have as a brand to be that Nike to these people is amazing.
Yeah.
It's amazing. It must get you so excited.
It really does. I think sometimes you can fall over yourself with the amount of things that you could do, but we're still young. So for us, it's really about like, what are the most powerful and impactful things we can do at this moment in the journey and not getting caught up in, you know, we're 30 years behind Nike. So, you know, sometimes you're like, I want to do all these incredible things at Nike, but, you know, we're not there yet. So let's do the things that can make the most impact on our community effectively at this time.
A strategy question for you. So is your view you want to own the whole space eventually, like long-term thinking, or would you partner? Because when you talk about sleep, obviously you do nothing around sleep. That screams 30 amazing partnership opportunities and everything else. Or is the long-term view not partnership because one day you want to own the whole lot?
Yeah. My ultimate dream would be to own the whole lot in a way that makes sense. I don't see partnership as a massive part of that strategy, but I'm also long in the tooth enough now to know things change and the path to the vision will vary. So I don't know, we might get an incredible partnership opportunity and I'm like, this totally makes sense for us achieving that goal. It totally makes sense for our community and our customers, sure. And I'm definitely not rigid about the path.
Amazing. I'm so excited to see where you go with this, honestly, because we spoke, must have been early 2020, maybe like mid 2020, definitely during the first lockdown, and just seeing where you guys have gone has been incredible. So super exciting to see the little parts of it that I have. But I've got a few questions for you that I ask everyone. My first question for you is, what is the single biggest risk you ever took, and what was the outcome?
Yeah, I think the single biggest risk I ever took was, leaving my job just to pursue Myo Master with I always say a baby on my boob, excuse profanity, but that was the reality. I was like at my desk with a baby on my boob.
Yeah.
And it was very scary, walking away from safety of, my secure job, but also like managing a newborn at the same time. So that's the biggest risk.
What would you say to someone who's in that situation right now, thinking of taking that risk? They've got a passion, they've got a dream, but they've got all the same fears that you had.
I would say nothing is irreversible. If it all goes wrong, you can go back to a job.
That's great
all good.
Advice.
And the second thing is, to be totally cliche about it, like, you're capable of anything. We're all capable of doing anything that we want to do. So, it's going to be difficult, but self-belief is key, and you can 100% achieve anything you want.
I love that. And I'm such a big believer in it as well. If people understood the power of their own mind, the world would be a scary place to be.
Yeah. Not only that, but like the way you should train your mind, like you train your body, is the way I think about it anyway. I'm like,
okay,
you've got to take proactive control of your mind, because if you don't, there'll be a lot of outside noise that will.
So what does that look like for you?
To me, that was a bit embarrassing.
No, go for it.
Yeah, it's the stuff we've talked about, curating. The second thing is surrounding myself with positive people who have the same kind of goals as I do. And that's been a big part of the journey. Like, I've not lost a lot of friends over the past couple of years, but probably distanced myself a little bit from a lot of people in my life that were incredibly great people, but they're not as ambitious as me or on the same path as me. And it's really important, I think, to surround yourself with people who are gunning for life the same way that you are. So I don't, for instance, have a lot of stay-at-home mum friends, because it's just not what I'm doing right now.
Yeah.
And they'll only make me feel bad about how I don't make homemade lunches or something.
Yeah. Well, they say you are a composite of the 6 people you spend the most time with, and it's very true.
100%.
Hence why my friends are Andrew Huberman and Dave Robbins.
Exactly right. Yeah, exactly. And then it's positive self-talk and taking real control of that, because we all have negative thoughts in our head, and that's only getting worse with the kind of the rise of technology and the world that we live in. So I try really hard to, when I'm training in the morning, I literally listen to motivation playlists of this guy who says, you can fucking achieve anything.
Please send this to me. Please send this to me.
Fucking can. And it's just the best start to the day.
Yeah, amazing. I mean, so we do a quarterly company get together for Connected, and now that I'm just a cheerleader for Connected, people far smarter than me doing all the actual work. But the thing that I say to everyone is, we are in a position that we're in because everyone is genuinely incredible at what they do, and they need to forget everything that they think about themselves for a second and accept that this is not a fluke, or it's not, someone else in the team is really good and that's why we are. Everyone, if they can just get into that mindset, it's a reason why people who come from a background which may give them this level of advantage can go 50 times further potentially than someone with this level of advantage with the right mindset.
Yeah, I just couldn't agree more. And maybe controversially, I've just got my son into this private school, right? And like, we had a lot of debates at home because my husband did not go to private school. We actually went to a really rough school in Nottingham, and he's like, well, I still managed to achieve my dreams. And I'm like, what I'm buying him here, I think, is self-belief and networks. And that's what we're paying you for here. So I want to give him this advantage around his mindset, because I do think you often see, you're going to be like, this isn't controversial, to your point earlier. But, I think you see a lot of people who've come through that education system who just do have a greater amount of self-belief that they can go on to achieve bigger things, because that's what they've been surrounded by. And so it's like, of course I can. Well, why wouldn't I? And And so that's why we're doing that. So I firmly believe, I totally agree with what you're saying. It's
Yeah.
like,
And it's why I'm so happy you're on the podcast, because again, it's what we said right at the start. It's see it to believe it. People seeing your story, again, it's like, yeah, well, okay, of course I can do this. And that's why I think it's so important. Okay, my next question for you is there anything you wish you'd done differently?
I wish I had two things. Firstly, I wish I'd made more room for failure and just accepted that when you start something like this, you're going to fail loads and loads of times, and it's actually a really important part of the process, rather than really beating myself up about it, because I wasted time focusing on the failures, thinking I wasn't doing it right, thinking everybody was doing it better than me, when really now I'm like, we're going to fail at things, and every time we fail, we're literally getting closer to the goal.
Yeah.
100%. Like, we've got to do this, 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 we've got to fail, we've got to fail, we've got to fail. Every time we do, we're like curating, improving. It's the essential part of the process.
Yeah.
And the second thing is really just try and enjoy it.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. It's great advice. You've got to enjoy the journey.
You have to.
Yeah,
it's really annoying
try.
because
Yeah.
it's like stressful and hard, but I try to remember that it's such a privilege to do your own thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think as well, there are so many people who have it so much worse as well. So having that, I try and remind myself of that daily. When you're having a shit day, it's like, how blessed are we to be in an opportunity to even have these failures?
Oh my God,
You
you
know?
are so right. And like, I always think of my dad when I think of this. Like, he's a Jamaican immigrant. He came here on a boat, and, it's his story to tell, but oh my God, like the things that he suffered to give us these opportunities are like unimaginable. Like the things that he went through and the experience that he's had, because he was so determined that he was going to get us to, so that I could literally do this thing that I'm doing right now. Like,
Amazing.
the sacrifices are unbelievable, both him and my mum. And so every time I'm like moaning about it, which I definitely still do, I try to just remind myself, like, that journey gave me this opportunity. So stop moaning about it, because it's not even close to what he suffered for us to
Amazing.
have this chance.
Amazing. What are you proudest of?
I'm proudest of two things. Firstly, my bravery. I think I take risks and I give things a go, and I've stuck with it, and I'm really proud of that. I'm really proud that I'm sitting here today, having gone through the last couple of years, because it was really hard.
Yeah.
Relatively. And I'm just really proud of my family, and my son and my marriage and my relationship, because that too is hard to sustain and to build. And I'm really proud that we're at this point that we're at, and that we are able to, give him the things that we're giving him, because we worked really hard to do that.
Yeah, amazing. That's a beautiful answer. And as I said to you before we started, managing to do the co-founder marriage, I mean, that is just incredible. That is amazing. I mean, this is someone who couldn't be further away from a marriage, but just from the outside in, it's like, wow, that looks tough to navigate, let alone doing the co-founding thing. So yeah, fair play. Fair play. Okay, my second, no, I've got a few more. What does it take to be successful?
I believe it takes incredible discipline, sacrifice, and focus. And I know that's an anti the vibe answer, but I think it takes those three things, and I think it takes clarity on your purpose. And the reason I say that is because for some people, success looks like the antithesis of those things. But I think the key is understanding what makes you happy and what your purpose is. And for me, I want to leave a legacy. I want to build something big, and I want to raise a great family. And I can't do those things without sacrifice, discipline, and hard work. Yeah. That's just the reality.
No, it's incredible. It's incredible. And that's, I think, great advice for anyone who wants to be as driven as you. That's what it takes, right? There's no negotiation around that. There is obviously balance. There's everything else that comes with it, and it's part of it, but it's that level of determination. Okay, amazing. 15-year-old Lottie walks in the room right now. What are you telling her?
I'm just telling her to get comfortable with who you are as quickly as possible. And I really don't want to be sort of banging on the race drum, but for me, that was a big part of my experience growing up. And so I just constantly felt uncomfortable about the situations I was in. So I would just say, you are who you are, get accepting it, enjoy it, embrace it, and go and chase your dreams.
Incredible. Okay. And my last one is, what scares you?
Failing. Like, I'm terrified of failure. Terrified of the business failing. I'm terrified of being a bad mum, and lots of other things. So yeah, I don't want to fail against my own definition of success.
Yeah, and I think that it's interesting because we know that failure is part of the journey, but it's also one of the biggest drivers that leads to success as well. It's like a really interesting cycle, right?
Yeah, and you're kind of alluding to the fact I sort of am semi-contradicting myself, because I was like, get comfortable with failure. But I think it's like, for me, I use that fear of the greater failures, if you like. So like, ultimately the business going down the Swanee or something, which still totally might happen.
Yeah.
I use that as a driver on the days when I don't want to get up, or the days when I want to stay at home, or the days when I go and have a drink, or the days I don't want to train. I'm like, I don't want to fail at this. So get up and do the thing.
It's such an interesting one, the entrepreneur's relationship with failure, and it's one that we're all navigating. And I think the longer time we spend as entrepreneurs, I think the way we see failure definitely changes, and we accept the smaller failures.
Micro failures.
But I think, this is my hypothesis, like, we're around the same age. I don't know, we can talk about this in 25 years' time, but my hypothesis is, though, the things that now feel like the big ones, if we're on the trajectory that we think we're on, in 25 years, we'll be like, yeah, that was a small one, right?
Totally.
It's the goalposts never stop moving.
You're absolutely right.
Let's hope so.
Well,
That's the only way I'm going to justify my big failures.
But I think you already are, from like looking back 3 years ago.
Yeah.
The stuff that I failed at 3 years ago at the time felt catastrophic, and now it's like, God, it was just a chink in the armor. You know? It's just a part of the journey.
Yeah, and that's why I find that the relationship with failure is so interesting. And I guess it will never stop. It's just our definition of micro will grow.
Change,
but I guess that's progress, right?
That is growth. That is exactly what it is. Yeah.
Lottie, what do you want to plug?
I want to plug Myo Master, which, if you are somebody who likes to train at whatever level, it's going to help you do more of that for longer. So follow us on social, come down to our community events, and check us out.
Amazing. Lottie, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.